I sold my house to help my daughter buy hers. She said, of course you'll have your own room. But then came the excuses. This isn't working. Maybe try assisted living. Last week I bought her house from the bank. Now she's the one packing her bags, and I'm deciding who moves in. The check was already in Christina's hands when I realized I'd just signed away 37 years of my life. $243,000. Every cent from selling the house where Adam and I had carved our initials into the basement beam during our first renovation, where we'd measured Christina's height on the kitchen doorframe each birthday, where we'd slow danced in the living room just 3 months before his stroke stole him from me. Mom, you're amazing, Christina whispered, tears streaming down her face as she clutched the cashier's check. I can't believe you're doing this for us. I'm Kimberly Matthews, and at 62 I thought I understood sacrifice. I'd sacrificed sleep when Christina had colic, sacrificed my teaching career when Adam's construction business needed bookkeeping, sacrificed my dreams of traveling Europe when Christina needed college tuition. But this felt different. This felt final. The house Adam and I built wasn't just brick and mortar. It was Sunday morning pancakes served on mismatched plates we'd collected from garage sales. It was the squeaky third step that warned us when teenage Christina snuck in past curfew. It was Adam's workshop in the garage, still smelling of sawdust and Old Spice, where he'd crafted the rocking chair that now sat empty in what used to be our bedroom. We built our life from scratch, I'd told the realtor when she suggested staging the house with rental furniture. These walls don't need decoration, they are the decoration. But walls don't hug you when you wake up reaching for a husband who'll never be there again. When Adam passed after that sudden stroke, one moment he was cursing at the football game, the next he was collapsing onto our worn hardwood floor. Christina became my anchor. She was the one who held me as my knees buckled at the funeral, my body shaking so violently I couldn't stand on my own. You'll never be alone, Mom. I promise, she'd whispered into my hair as I sobbed against her shoulder, surrounded by 200 people who somehow made me feel more isolated than ever. Those weren't empty words. 4 months after the funeral, Christina called every evening at 7:30, right when Adam used to come home from job sites. She'd bring groceries without being asked, helped me sort through Adam's clothes, even stayed overnight when the silence became too suffocating. That's why, when she and Ben appeared at my door 6 months later with that familiar excited gleam in her eyes, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Adam's death: purpose. Mom, sit down. I have the most incredible news, Christina had said, practically bouncing as she pulled Ben by the hand into my kitchen. Ben looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot, but Christina's enthusiasm was infectious. They'd found their dream house. A beautiful colonial with 4 bedrooms, a 2-car garage, and a backyard perfect for the grandchildren I secretly hoped they'd give me someday. The pictures on Christina's phone showed hardwood floors that gleamed, a kitchen island larger than my entire dining room, and windows that let in enough light to grow a garden. It's perfect, Mom. Absolutely perfect. But... Her voice trailed off and she glanced at Ben. We're short on the down payment, Ben finished, his voice barely above a mumble. 20% down on a $400,000 house is $80,000, I said quietly. Mathematics had always been my strong suit. We have 60, Christina said quickly. We've been saving for 3 years, cutting every corner, but house prices just keep climbing. By the time we save the extra 20,000, this house will be gone, or prices will have jumped again. I watched my daughter's face as she spoke, the way her eyebrows furrowed exactly like Adam's when he was working through a complicated problem, the way she bit her lower lip when she was nervous. She was 34 years old, married for 2 years, and desperate to build the life Adam and I had created. We're family, she said, reaching across my kitchen table to hold my hands that were starting to show age spots Adam used to trace with his thumb. You'll have your own room. Your own space. Always. The guest room upstairs had a bay window that overlooked their future backyard. She'd already planned where I'd put my reading chair, how we'd share morning coffee, how I'd help with dinner and maybe even babysit future grandchildren. Think about it, Ben added, though his tone suggested he hoped I'd decline. You're rattling around in this big house all alone. Wouldn't it be nice to have family around again? That night I sat in Adam's recliner, surrounded by the ghosts of our life together. The grandfather clock he'd restored still chimed every hour. The wedding photos still smiled from their silver frames. But the house felt like a museum to a life that was over. The decision took 3 weeks and countless sleepless nights. I walked through every room, touching walls Adam had painted, floors he'd refinished, fixtures he'd installed with his own hands. The house appraiser valued it at $260,000, enough to cover their down payment and leave me with a small cushion. "I'll do it," I told Christina over the phone, my voice steadier than I felt. The closing was surprisingly quick. I signed papers transferring ownership to strangers who promised to love the house as much as we had. I packed 37 years into 2 boxes and 6 garbage bags, keeping only what would fit in Christina's guest room. Moving day arrived with autumn rain that seemed appropriate for endings. As the moving truck pulled away from the curb, I stood in the driveway one last time, memorizing the front porch where Adam had proposed, the maple tree we'd planted for Christina's first birthday, the window of what had been our bedroom. "Ready, Mom?" Christina asked softly, her hand on my shoulder. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and climbed into her car with my 2 boxes and a heart full of hope for this new chapter. At first, everything felt warm and promising, like the beginning of the fairy tale I'd convinced myself we were writing together. The first morning in my new home, I woke to the sound of cardboard boxes being moved outside my door. Through the thin wall, I heard Christina's voice. "We can store the Christmas decorations in Mom's closet. She won't need much space anyway." My closet. The guest room closet that was supposed to be mine had become their overflow storage within 24 hours. The room itself was smaller than I'd remembered from the house tour. 10 by 12 feet with a narrow window that faced the neighbor's fence. The bay window Christina had described during our kitchen table conversation? That was in the master bedroom, their bedroom. My reading chair sat wedged between their exercise bike and a stack of Ben's old college textbooks. "Morning, Mom." Christina chirped when I emerged for breakfast, but her smile felt rehearsed. "Coffee's fresh." "Well, sort of fresh. We made it an hour ago." I poured myself a cup from the dregs at the bottom of the pot. The coffee was bitter, nothing like the smooth blend Adam and I had shared every morning for decades. When I reached for the sugar bowl, Ben cleared his throat. "Actually, Kimberly, that's the expensive organic stuff. Maybe use the regular sugar? It's in the cabinet." The regular sugar was stored behind a collection of protein powders on the highest shelf. At 5'4", I needed a step stool to reach it. By the time I managed to sweeten my coffee, they'd finished breakfast and were rushing off to work. "Make yourself at home," Christina called over her shoulder, but something in her tone suggested the exact opposite. By the 3rd week, I'd learned the unspoken rules. Don't use the good towels in the hall bathroom. Those were for guests. Actual guests, apparently, not mothers who'd sold their homes. Don't sit in Ben's chair during evening TV time, even though no one had mentioned it was his chair until I'd made that mistake twice. Don't open the pantry after 9 p.m. because it squeaks too loudly. The pantry lock appeared on a Tuesday morning while I was trying to find ingredients for pancakes. Adam's favorite recipe that I'd hoped to share with them. "Oh, that," Christina said when I asked about the small padlock. "We're trying to portion control our snacks. You know how it is, so easy to mindlessly munch." I hadn't been mindlessly munching. I'd eaten 1 granola bar the night before when dinner had been salmon and quinoa, foods that left me hungry 2 hours later. Ben's joke started small. "Careful, Kimberly, you're using a lot of paper towels there." "Wow, long shower this morning. Hope we don't run out of hot water." "Another load of laundry? You might single-handedly fund the water company." I began timing my showers, counting paper towels, washing my clothes by hand in the sink. The woman who'd once hosted Thanksgiving for 20 people was now rationing her use of dish soap. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in November. I'd spent the day organizing their chaotic junk drawer as a small way to contribute, arranging batteries, rubber bands, and takeout menus into neat compartments. When Christina came home, she stood frozen in the kitchen doorway. "Mom, did you go through our stuff?" I organized the drawer. It was such a mess, and I thought, "That's our private space," Ben interrupted, his voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. "We didn't ask you to go through our things." I was trying to help. "We don't need that kind of help," Christina said, already shuffling through the drawer, disturbing my careful organization. "Please don't touch our personal items." That night, I lay in bed listening to their muffled voices through the wall. Their bedroom shared a wall with mine, and the insulation was apparently more decorative than functional. "She's always here," Ben's voice carried clearly. "I can't relax in my own house." "She doesn't have anywhere else to go," Christina replied, but her tone lacked conviction. "That's not our problem. She's a grown woman. She could get her own apartment." "With what money?" "She gave us everything for the down payment. She chose to do that. Nobody forced her." There was a long pause before Christina spoke again, and when she did, the words shattered something inside me I hadn't even realized was still whole. "She's lonely, clingy. And the house isn't big enough for three. My daughter." The child-eyed rocked through midnight fevers, driven to soccer practice in 3 different states, supported through her divorce from her first husband. The same daughter who'd promised I'd never be alone. I pressed my face into the pillow to muffle the sound of my crying. The next morning, Christina approached me with a manila folder and an expression I recognized from when she was 7 and had broken my favorite vase. "Mom, Ben and I have been talking. Maybe it's time to consider some other living arrangements." She opened the folder to reveal glossy brochures. Sunset Manor Assisted Living featured smiling elderly people in wheelchairs, playing bingo and doing arts and crafts. Golden Years Community showed a dining hall where residents sat at assigned tables like school children. "There's a great place just 15 minutes away," Christina continued, her voice artificially bright. "They have activities, meal plans, people your own age. You might be happier." I stared at the brochures, these colorful advertisements for the place where families sent parents they no longer wanted to see daily. "What about your promise?" I asked quietly. Christina's eyes darted everywhere except my face. She examined her manicure, straightened the already straight brochures, adjusted her hair. Ben answered for her. "Well, circumstances change, Kimberly. We're young newlyweds trying to start our lives. This arrangement isn't working for anyone." I closed the folder without looking at the remaining brochures. "I see. You're not angry, are you?" Christina finally met my eyes, and for a moment I saw the little girl who used to crawl into my lap after nightmares. "No, sweetheart. I'm not angry." That afternoon while they were at work, I packed my 2 boxes. The same 2 boxes I'd arrived with, now somehow even lighter. I'd given away more belongings during my stay. Books to their donation bag, sweaters that wouldn't fit in the small closet, photographs that cluttered up the clean aesthetic. I left the assisted living brochures on their kitchen counter with a note. "Thank you for opening your home to me. I'll find my own way." The woman who'd given away her home was now being handed brochures with smiling elderly people in wheelchairs, as if happiness could be manufactured in institutional dining halls and scheduled activity periods. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't leave a forwarding address. I simply picked up my boxes and walked out the front door of the house my sacrifice had purchased. But as I loaded my boxes into the taxi, I made a promise to myself. One I intended to keep. This story wasn't over yet. The taxi dropped me at Willowbrook Senior Living. Not assisted living, but independent housing for people over 55. I'd found it in the phone book 3 days earlier, circling ads with a red pen while sitting in a diner that served coffee strong enough to strip paint. Room 14B became my world. 12 by 15 feet, furnished with a single bed, a small table, and a chair that had seen better decades. The kitchenette consisted of a mini fridge, microwave, and hot plate. Everything I needed to survive, nothing I needed to live. But the silence here was different. At Christina's house, silence felt heavy with judgment, thick with whispered complaints and unspoken resentment. Here silence simply existed. My elderly neighbors minded their own business behind thin walls, and their indifference felt like kindness after months of walking on eggshells. Mrs. Chin in 14A played Cantonese opera at exactly 3 o'clock each afternoon. Mr. Rodriguez from 14C shuffled past my door every morning at 7:30, his walker squeaking a rhythmic hello. These strangers asked nothing of me, expected nothing from me, and somehow gave me more peace than my own daughter had. I established a routine. Morning coffee while watching the parking lot pigeons fight over breadcrumbs. Afternoon walks to the library where I'd sit for hours, not reading, just existing among books that asked nothing of me but companionship. Evening television with the volume low enough not to disturb neighbors who'd never once complained about my presence. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, 6 weeks after I'd settled into my new reality. Plain white envelope, return address from First Federal Bank of Ohio. I almost threw it away, assuming it was another credit card offer targeting seniors on fixed incomes. Instead, I found my name typed on expensive letterhead. "Dear Mrs. Matthews," it began, and my heart stuttered. They were writing to me about Christina's house. The house my money had purchased, the house that had become my exile. The language was formal, legal, cold. Non-payment of mortgage obligations. 30 days past due. 60 days past due. Notice of intent to foreclose. Christina and Ben had missed 3 consecutive mortgage payments. I read the letter twice, then a third time, each word sinking deeper into my consciousness. The house I'd sacrificed everything to help them buy was slipping away from them month by month, payment by payment. My hands shook as I reached for my phone, then stopped. What would I say? "I heard you're losing the house. Need help with the mortgage?" The same woman who'd been handed assisted living brochures wasn't likely to receive desperate calls for financial rescue. Instead, I walked to the community center and used their computer to research foreclosure laws in Ohio. The rabbit hole of legal websites led me through timelines, procedures, rights of lenders, and responsibilities of borrowers. By closing time, I understood exactly how Christina and Ben's dream was crumbling. Thursday morning brought another letter. This one was addressed to occupants. A generic notice that the property would be auctioned in 45 days if the outstanding balance wasn't resolved. Outstanding balance: $312,847. I stared at that number for 20 minutes. Less than what I'd sold my house for. Significantly less. Friday, I called Margaret Hinley, the lawyer who'd handled Adam's estate. Her voice warmed when she heard mine. "Kimberly, how are you settling in with Christina? She must be so grateful to have you close." "Actually, Margaret, I need to ask you something hypothetical." "Of course, dear. What's on your mind?" "If a house was going into foreclosure and someone wanted to buy it directly from the bank, how would that work?" Margaret paused. "Well, there are several options. Pre-foreclosure purchase, auction bidding, or post-foreclosure acquisition." "Why do you ask?" "Just curious about the process." "Kimberly, this isn't like you to ask hypothetical legal questions." I took a breath. "It's Christina's house. They're behind on payments." "Oh honey, I'm so sorry. Are you thinking of helping them catch up?" "I'm thinking of buying it." The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. "Kimberly, that's quite a decision. Have you discussed this with Christina?" "No. And I don't intend to." Monday morning, I sat in Margaret's office with Adam's pension statements, my savings account records, and a determination that surprised even me. I'd kept Adam's pension untouched since his death, some superstitious belief that spending it would make him more gone than he already was. "The outstanding mortgage balance is roughly $313,000, Margaret explained, spreading papers across her mahogany desk. "With penalties, fees, and legal costs, probably closer to $320. You'd need to move quickly." "I have it." "You have $320,000? Adam's pension lump sum was $400,000. I never touched it. Plus my savings." Margaret leaned back in her leather chair, studying me with the expression she'd worn when I'd insisted on reading every page of Adam's will. "Kimberly, forgive me for asking, but why not simply help Christina and Ben catch up on their payments? Why buy the house outright?" I thought about Christina's locked pantry, Ben's jokes about my laundry habits, the assisted living brochures left on their kitchen counter like a hint that had grown into a demand. "Because helping them taught me something about family, Margaret. Sometimes love looks like rescue. Sometimes it looks like consequences." She spent the next hour explaining the process. "Contact the bank's loss mitigation department. Submit a cash offer. Wait for approval. Close within 30 days. They'll likely accept your offer," Margaret said. "Cash buyers are gold to banks trying to avoid foreclosure proceedings." "And Christina and Ben? They'll receive notice that the bank has accepted an offer from a third-party buyer. Standard procedure. They won't know it's you until closing." I signed the retainer agreement and walked out of Margaret's office feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. Power. The bank representative, Mr. Walsh, sounded surprised when I called. "You want to purchase the property at 1247 Maple Grove Lane?" "Yes." "Cash offer. Full asking price." "Ma'am, I have to ask, are you familiar with the property?" I almost laughed. "You could say that." Within 3 weeks, the paperwork was complete. I signed my name on documents that transferred ownership of Christina's dream house to me. Not sentiment this time. Not love or sacrifice or hope for family harmony. Purpose. The house was mine again, but everything had changed. I chose Thursday at 10:47 a.m. for a reason. Christina would be home from her morning yoga class, but Ben wouldn't return from his sales calls until afternoon. I wanted to see her face first. The daughter who'd promised I'd never be alone, then handed me brochures for institutional care. My hands didn't shake as I walked up the brick pathway I'd helped pay for. The autumn mums Christina had planted in the flower boxes were already wilting from neglect. The newspaper lay soggy on the front step, 3 days' worth of unread headlines about other people's problems. I rang the doorbell instead of knocking. Somehow knocking felt too familiar, too much like family. Just a minute. Christina's voice called from inside, the same hurried tone she'd used when I lived here, and interrupted her routine by existing. The door swung open and Christina's face cycled through expressions like a broken slideshow. Surprise. Confusion. Guilt. Then something harder, more defensive. Mom? What are you doing here? She looked thinner than when I'd left 6 weeks ago. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her yoga outfit hung loose on her frame. The house behind her was messier than I'd ever seen it. Dishes piled in the sink, mail scattered across the counter, Ben's clothes draped over the furniture I'd once been scolded for sitting on. May I come in? Well, Ben's not here and we're kind of in the middle of. This won't take long. I stepped past her into the foyer, noting how the hardwood floors I'd admired during the house tour now showed scuff marks and needed refinishing. The pristine home they'd been so proud of was showing signs of neglect that matched their financial situation. Christina closed the door with more force than necessary. Mom, if this is about what happened before you left, we can talk, but... I pulled the manila envelope from my purse. Official bank letterhead, legal-size paper, the kind of documentation that changes lives in 12-point Times New Roman font. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. Christina stared at the envelope like it might bite her. What are you talking about? The house is under new ownership as of yesterday. The bank accepted a cash offer to avoid foreclosure proceedings. That's impossible. Christina's voice cracked. We would have been notified. There's a whole process. We have rights. I opened the envelope and removed the eviction notice, holding it so she could read the official seal, the court stamps, the signatures that made everything legally binding. You were notified. Multiple times. 3 months of missed payments according to the bank's records. Christina's face went white as she read. Her lips moved silently, processing words like default, and foreclosure, and immediate vacation required. Who bought it? She whispered. Someone who understood its true value. The front door slammed open, making both of us jump. Ben stormed in, his face flushed red, still wearing his rumpled sales suit from yesterday. Christina, did you see the notice from the bank? Some vulture swooped in and bought our house right out from under us. He stopped short when he saw me. Kimberly, what are you doing here? Christina held up the eviction notice with trembling hands. Mom brought this. Ben's eyes darted between the legal document and my face, his salesman's brain working to process information that didn't fit his expectations. You brought us an eviction notice? How did you even get? His voice died as understanding dawned. Oh my God. You bought our house. I bought my investment. Your investment? Ben's voice climbed an octave. This is our home. No, I said quietly. This was my home. I paid for it. I furnished the down payment that made your dream possible. You turned it into a place where I wasn't welcome. Christina finally found her voice. How could you do this to us? We're your family. The word hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Family, I repeated. You mean like when you locked the pantry so I couldn't eat your expensive granola bars? Like when you timed my showers and counted my paper towels? Like when you handed me brochures for assisted living because your house wasn't big enough for 3? Ben stepped forward, his salesman's aggression surfacing. You're being vindictive. This is revenge. This is consequences. We can fight this. Ben shouted. We'll get a lawyer. This has to be illegal somehow. I almost smiled. I used a lawyer. Margaret Hinley. She handled all the paperwork. Everything's perfectly legal. Cash purchase, clear title, 30-day notice period as required by state law. Christina collapsed onto the couch I'd once been told not to sit on without permission. We don't have anywhere to go. We don't have money for deposits, first month's rent. You had money for yoga classes and organic sugar and expensive coffee, I observed. You had money to refinance this house and pull out equity for vacations and new cars. You just didn't have money for the actual mortgage payments. We made some mistakes, Christina whispered, tears streaming down her face. But we can fix this. We can work something out. You're my mother. Yes, I am. And you're my daughter. The daughter who promised I'd never be alone, then made me feel more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. Ben paced the living room like a caged animal. This is insane. You can't just buy someone's house because your feelings got hurt. I didn't buy it because my feelings were hurt. I bought it because you defaulted on the mortgage. The bank was happy to sell to a cash buyer instead of going through lengthy foreclosure proceedings. I walked to the mantel where Christina had displayed the family photos I'd brought from my old house, the ones she'd later suggested I remove because they cluttered the clean aesthetic. They were gone now, replaced by wedding photos and vacation snapshots that didn't include me. You did this to yourselves, I said, turning back to face them both. You turned your home into a cage and pushed out the one person who handed you the keys. Christina's sobs filled the silence. Ben stood frozen, his salesman's confidence finally cracked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I let the legal notice do the talking, its official language more powerful than any emotional argument I could make. 30 days, I repeated, walking toward the door I'd entered with hope and was leaving with justice. The locks will be changed on November 15th. I suggest you make arrangements. That evening I sat in the backyard garden where Adam and I had once planted roses together. The sprinkler system Christina had installed was broken, and the rose bushes were struggling, but they were still alive, still reaching toward the sun despite months of neglect. For the first time in months I slept in peace. The moving truck pulled away from the curb on November 12th, 3 days before the legal deadline. I watched from the bay window in what had been Christina's master bedroom, sipping coffee from a mug that didn't have rules attached to it. They'd left damage. Nail holes in the walls where their oversized art had hung. Scratches on the hardwood floors from furniture dragged without care. A burn mark on the kitchen counter where someone had set a hot pan directly on the granite. The house bore scars from their occupancy, but scars could be healed. I started with paint. Not the sterile beige Christina had chosen, but warm colors that breathed life back into rooms that had felt cold for too long. The living room became sage green, the color of new growth. The kitchen transformed into buttery yellow, bright enough to chase away the shadows of criticism that had lingered there. Each brushstroke felt like reclamation. The family photos came next, the ones Christina had banished to storage boxes in the garage. Adam's smile returned to the mantelpiece. Our wedding picture found its place on the hallway table. The photo of 3-year-old Christina on my shoulders at the county fair went back up in the kitchen, because forgiveness sometimes means remembering who someone used to be before they forgot who they were. The furniture shopping surprised me. I'd lived with other people's choices for so long. First Adam's practical selections, then Christina's designer aspirations, that I'd forgotten what I actually liked. The kitchen table I chose was round, not rectangular. Wood, not glass. Big enough for 4 people, not the massive 8-seater Christina had insisted would make a statement. I bought 2 chairs initially. One for me, one for whoever might need a place to sit and be heard. The bedroom makeover took the longest. I painted the walls lavender, installed bookshelves where Christina's exercise equipment had gathered dust, and positioned a reading chair by the window that overlooked the garden. This room would never again be storage for someone else's overflow. My phone rang constantly during those first weeks. Christina called 12 times the first day alone, her voicemails cycling through anger, disbelief, bargaining, and desperation. Ben left 2 messages, both filled with legal threats he couldn't afford to pursue. I listened to none of them completely. The inspiration for the shelter came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Rodriguez, my former neighbor from the retirement community, mentioned during a grocery store encounter that her niece worked for Safe Harbor, a local organization helping women escape domestic violence. They're always looking for temporary housing, she said, studying my face with the shrewd assessment that comes with age. Kimberly, you've got that look of someone who's found her purpose. The application process took 6 weeks. background checks, home inspections, interviews with social workers who needed to ensure I understood the gravity of opening my doors to women fleeing danger. I passed every requirement, and on January 3rd, Marissa arrived. She was 19, 7 months pregnant, and carried everything she owned in a backpack that had seen better years. Her left eye was still healing from a bruise that had faded to yellow-green, and she flinched when I moved too quickly during introductions. "Mrs. Matthews, I want to thank you for this opportunity," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I won't be any trouble. I promise. Marissa, this is your home now. You don't have to promise me anything except that you'll be safe here." She slept 14 hours the first night. When she emerged from what had been Christina's former bedroom, she found me making pancakes. Adam's recipe, the one I'd never gotten to share with my daughter. "Those smell incredible," Marissa said, hovering in the kitchen doorway like she needed permission to enter. Adam's secret ingredient was vanilla extract in the batter. He said it made them taste like celebration. We ate breakfast in comfortable silence. Two women who'd both learned that sometimes starting over means accepting help from strangers who become family. Over the following weeks, I watched Marissa transform. The flinching stopped. Her voice grew stronger. She started community college classes online, studying medical terminology because she wanted to become a nurse's aide. In the evenings, we'd sit at the round kitchen table while she did homework and I worked crossword puzzles. "I've never lived anywhere that felt like home," she told me one February evening, her hand resting on her growing belly. "Even as a kid, I was always waiting for someone to tell me I didn't belong." "You belong here," I said simply. "Why?" The question came out raw, vulnerable. "Why would you do this for someone you don't even know?" I thought about Christina's locked pantry, Ben's jokes about my laundry habits, the assisted living brochures that had made me feel like a burden instead of a blessing. Because everyone deserves a place where they're wanted, not just tolerated. Marissa's daughter, Elena, was born on March 15th. I drove them to the hospital, held Marissa's hand during contractions, and became the first person besides medical staff to hold that tiny, perfect baby. "Would you be her honorary grandmother?" Marissa asked from her hospital bed, tears streaming down her face. "I know it's crazy, but you're the closest thing to family I've ever had." "I'd be honored." The knock came on a rainy Thursday in April. I opened the door to find Christina, soaking wet, her hair plastered to her head, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Mom, please. Can we talk?" She looked smaller than I remembered, worn down by months of couch surfing and cheap apartment hunting. Behind her, Ben sat in their car, staring straight ahead with the stubborn pride of someone who refused to admit he needed help. "I made terrible mistakes," Christina said, her voice breaking. "I treated you horribly. I know that. But you're my mother and I need—" "What do you need, Christina?" "Forgiveness. Another chance. I don't know. Maybe we could work something out? I could pay rent, help with groceries." I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, who'd learned to see generosity as weakness and kindness as something to exploit. "Love isn't about the room you give someone," I said quietly. "It's about the space you make in your heart." Christina's face crumpled. I know I didn't make space for you. But I'm trying to change. I've been going to counseling, working on myself." "That's good. Change is important. But this house isn't available for rent." "Mom. You chose to see me as a burden instead of a blessing. You handed me brochures for assisted living because I inconvenienced your life. Now you want forgiveness because you need something from me." I didn't hug her. I didn't hate her. I simply closed the door after she left, the same way she'd closed her heart when I'd needed her most. Through the window, I watched their car disappear into the rain, carrying my daughter toward a future she'd have to build without my sacrifice supporting it. Inside, Marissa was feeding Elena in the rocking chair Adam had built 30 years ago, humming a lullaby in Spanish. The house filled with the sounds of new life, second chances, and love that didn't come with conditions. This was what home was supposed to feel like. The transformation began with my reflection in the hallway mirror. For months, I'd glimpsed myself in passing. Always rushing, always apologizing for taking up space, always shrinking to fit other people's expectations. But now, standing in my own foyer with morning light streaming through windows I'd chosen to leave uncurtained, I saw someone different. I saw Kimberly Matthews. Not Christina's mother, not Adam's widow, not the woman who'd been handed assisted living brochures. I saw a homeowner. A decision maker. A woman who'd reclaimed her power one legal document at a time. The book club started accidentally. Marissa mentioned struggling with her prenatal reading. Medical journals were dense, and she'd never had time to develop a love for books during her chaotic childhood. I offered to read alongside her, and somehow word spread through Safe Harbor's network. Would it be okay if my friend Sarah joined us? Marissa asked one Tuesday evening, Elena sleeping peacefully in her car seat beside the couch. She's staying at another shelter, but she loves romance novels. Sarah arrived with 3 other women, all carrying paperback books with worn covers and stories of escape. They were younger than me, their struggles different from mine, but we shared something fundamental: the experience of being underestimated. Mrs. Matthews, Sarah said after our first official meeting, you should start a real book club. For women like us, but also for older ladies who might be lonely. The idea took root like the morning glories I'd planted along the back fence. Slowly at first, then with surprising vigor. Within a month, 12 women gathered in my living room every Thursday evening. Ages ranged from 22 to 78. Some were escaping abusive relationships. Others were widows learning to navigate independence. A few were empty nesters discovering who they were beyond motherhood. Margaret Henley, my lawyer, became a regular after I mentioned the group during a legal consultation about expanding the shelter program. Kimberly, I haven't discussed books with intelligent women since my divorce 10 years ago, she confessed. My ex-husband thought book clubs were frivolous female gatherings. I believed him. Dorothy Chen, Mrs. Chen's daughter-in-law from my old retirement community, drove 30 minutes each week because she'd heard about our group through the neighborhood gossip network. My husband died 3 years ago, she told us during her first meeting. Everyone keeps asking when I'm going to move on, but nobody asks what I want to move toward. The cooking classes evolved naturally. Teen mothers from Safe Harbor needed basic life skills. How to plan meals on food stamps, how to make nutritious baby food from scratch, how to turn cheap ingredients into satisfying dinners. I'd learned these skills during the early years with Adam, when his construction business was struggling and every dollar mattered. Miss Kimberly, 16-year-old Jasmine said, carefully measuring flour for bread that would feed her family for 3 days. How do you know all this stuff? I learned it the same way you're learning it now because I had to. The kitchen that had once made me feel like an intruder became a classroom where young women discovered their capability. We made meals together, shared stories, and created recipes for survival that had nothing to do with cooking. You should charge for these classes, suggested Maria, a 17-year-old whose knife skills had improved dramatically since her first week. This is better than any cooking show. The best lessons aren't for sale, I replied, watching her confidently julienne vegetables that would have intimidated her a month earlier. The quote frame happened after a particularly difficult Thursday book club discussion about the color purple. We'd been talking about strength, about the difference between submission and strategy, about how survival sometimes requires silence before it allows for speaking. You remind me of Celie, Dorothy had said. Quiet for so long that people mistake it for weakness, until one day they realize the quiet was just preparation. I found the quote online that weekend, don't mistake quiet for weak. Some storms don't make noise, but they change everything. The frame went up in the entryway where everyone entering my home would see it, including me every time I left and returned. The phone calls changed too. Christina's number stopped appearing on my caller ID after that rainy April confrontation. The silence felt different from the loneliness I'd experienced after Adam's death. This silence was chosen, protective, peaceful. But other calls multiplied. Women from book club checking on each other between meetings. Former shelter residents updating me on their progress. Marissa graduated from her medical program. Sarah started her own catering business. Jasmine got accepted to community college with a full scholarship. Mrs. Matthews, I got the apartment. Elena's excited voice bubbled through the phone speaker. She was now 4 years old, calling me from Marissa's new place across town. Mama says you can visit whenever you want. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'll bring cookies next time I come over. The kind with chocolate chips? Is there any other kind worth making? My Tuesday mornings became sacred. I'd sit at the round kitchen table with my tea, loose-leaf Earl Grey, not the generic bags Christina had relegated me to, and plan the week ahead. Which shelter residents needed extra support? what recipes to teach in the next cooking class, which books to suggest for upcoming discussions. The steam from my mug would catch the morning light streaming through windows that faced the garden where Adam's roses had not only survived but thrived under my renewed care. The kitchen that had once felt like enemy territory now held the comfortable energy of Command Central. "You've done something remarkable here," Margaret observed during one of her Thursday visits, gesturing toward the living room full of women debating the merits of historical fiction versus contemporary drama. "You've created exactly what you needed when Christina pushed you out." "I created what we all needed," I corrected. "A place where being enough is actually enough." The doorbell still rang occasionally with unexpected visitors. Neighbors asking to borrow tools, former shelter residents stopping by with their children, women who'd heard about the book club through the intricate network of female communication that spans age, race, and economic boundaries. But never Christina. And increasingly that felt less like loss and more like boundary maintenance. On my 64th birthday, the women from book club surprised me with a cake and a gift. A custom doormat that read, "You are welcome here," in elegant script. "We wanted you to see what we see every time we come to your door," Marissa explained, Elena helping her carry the wrapped doormat to the front step. As I placed it in position, I realized the truth of what I'd built. This wasn't just a house reclaimed or a heart rebuilt. This was a life redesigned by a woman who'd finally learned the difference between being wanted and being needed, between love and obligation, between accommodation and genuine welcome. Every morning now, making tea in my kitchen, choosing who sits at my table, I smile. Not because I'm grateful for scraps, but because I'm satisfied with abundance I created myself. If this story of sweet revenge had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Kimberly showed up with those eviction papers and Christina realized she'd lost the house her mother paid for. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Subscribe for more incredible revenge stories and hit that notification bell.